Hello and welcome to Banking Frontiers Live. We are in for a great conversation in the area of technology transformation and technology directions 2024, as well as understanding the landscape of technology in North America, especially from the retail banking side. And with me, I have a very insightful and a knowledgeable guest today who has been at the helm of affairs in retail banking technologies across geographies in Asia, in India, in Middle East, and is also heading a senior level position in retail banking technologies in one of the largest five banks in Canada. Please join me in welcoming Shruti Awasthi, who is the director for one of the leading banks, and she is on a personal note here, sharing with us some of her personal views and perspectives about the technology transformation happening in the banking industry, the role of women in the banking industry, and what is going to be the road ahead. Shruti, welcome to Banking Frontiers Live.
Thank you so much, Babu, for inviting me. This seems like a very engaging conversation to be had.
Superb. Thank you very much, Shruti. So let us understand, given your global experiences from different markets like Southeast Asia to Middle East to Canada, what are the kind of technological, cultural differences that you see when you look from the lens of retail banking and retail banking related technologies, especially from the Canadian perspective?
Thank you. And that feels like an amazing question to start the conversation because you're correct. Like when we look at the geographical differences between North America, especially Canada, and Middle East and Southeast Asia, Canada is basically a very highly developed and diverse economy. We have a very strong emphasis on natural resources such as oil, gas, and minerals and timber. And Canada also boasts of a very well-developed services sector, including finance, technology, and healthcare. When it comes to Southeast Asia, you understand that we are still in the phase of being a developing economy on that side of the world, right? So when I talk about Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, and Vietnam, the economy is characterized by a mix of agriculture, manufacturing, and services sector. But specifically talking about economies like Singapore and India, I think we are highly developed financially and technologically, so much so that India boasts of actually sending and having a huge amount of engineers across the globe who identify as Indian nationals, right? So that is one of the biggest changes that I see in terms of how the trade actually occurs, and because trade is a huge component of how an economy develops in the near future, because Canada is developed and has already existing trade agreements like the NAFTA, and then we have the CPTPP, which is the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership. Canada already has those existing trade ties with the rest of the world, where it is able to export all of its resources and minerals and oils and other stuff. But when it comes to Southeast Asia, these countries participate in regional trade agreements, right? Because these economies are still coming up of age. So we have ASEAN, which is really critical for countries like India to participate in. And when it comes to Middle East has this beautiful corridor called the Gulf Cooperation Council, or the GCC, which really helps the Middle East countries to boast of a really robust features around its natural resources, its labor force, and other stuff. So I think the changes and the differences are many. But coming back to the consumer behavior, I think for any economy, the consumer behavior changes due to cultural, economic, social, and environmental factors. When it comes to Canadians, I think Canadians tend to be very open to diverse products and services. However, there is a very strong emphasis on quality, sustainability, and ethical considerations. And Canadians are known to be brand loyal, right? Loyalty is really, really important to them. When it comes to Middle East, it is influenced heavily by Islamic traditions and values. So there is definitely a preference for halal products, certain cultural nuances impacting purchasing decisions. And coming last but not the least to Southeast Asia, is there are some countries where there is preference for traditional products, While with others, more so like India and Thailand and Singapore, there is a growing interest in Western goods as well. So I would say all in all, it's a completely different market with a completely different consumer perception and behavior. But the good thing is consumers, irrespective of their jurisdiction, they want good quality products and services to assist in their day-to-day life. And that is what we are trying to do wherever we are, right?
Superb. In fact, you gave a very good perspective about all these regional kind of countries also coming together, like the GCC coming together and creating the GCC spectrum. In fact, in retail banking, I have heard a lot of very interesting experience about different countries now forming consortiums for payments, like the Singapore and the ASEAN coming together, the Gulf countries coming together, the SEPA and kind of things. Do you see a lot of such kind of things also coming and shaping up the future of payments market? How do you see this going forward?
So payments is actually a very interesting space. And with the recent development of a lot of payment enabling technologies, I think we are living in very exciting times, especially in Canada, right? There is the RPAA, which is the Retail Payments Activities Act that the government is working very closely for. There are ramifications. The government is also working towards having a real-time payment system in Canada, although delayed, but we will definitely have one of those. For those of you who are really, really stuck into the advancements of payments, I think the government in its fall economic statement in November 2021 of 23 has also talked about advancing open banking as one of its measures. So I think that for Canadian economy, at least a couple of coming years are going to be really exciting and interesting. But we know that we come from other jurisdictions where the payment landscape is even more evolved than what it is currently in Canada. So when we talk about, contactless payments and digital wallets, I think UPI, or the Unified Payment Interface of India, is a leading global example of being the fastest payment rails in the world, settling real-time payments. And it is also a pioneer for peer-to-peer payments and merchant payments and QR code payments. So I think it's a good mix, because all of the immigrants who are coming to Canada, and especially internationally trained professionals in banking, we know how those systems work in that jurisdiction, given the landscape of regulation and legislation. And we bring in that expertise and that perspective to Canada once we migrate here, to assist in how we can comply with the Canadian regulation and the existing laws, as well as look into consumer behaviors. But it's a really, really interesting time, especially not forgetting the whole cryptocurrency movement that is also underplaying right now. So there is a lot that can be facilitated by regulatory development and increasing consumer acceptance. There is a whole gamut of the cross-border payments, because countries just like Canada, which have a whole lot of immigrant population, we always have those ties back home, and we would want to send money back home for any number of events, right? For taking care of our old age parents, for helping in our sister's education, our brother's wedding, or a lot more things. And I think just by complying with ISO 20022 regulations and the whole SWIFT modernization of payments, the cross-border payments is also going to be a critical factor in advancing all of the whole payment landscape. So I think personally, to me, it's the most exciting time to be a payments professional in Canada.
Super. Actually, yes, because payment is one of the most happening part of any fintech engagement or any fintech revolutions that are taking place as such. If you try to gauge what kind of innovations are taking place. Now, just taking a clue from here, you see a lot of trending technologies. You spoke about open pay banking, which is coming into Canada in probably 2025. We may see it as 100% reality happening. Similarly, what are those kind of trending technologies you think will make an impact in Canada in the near future, and as such in the banking industry per se as well?
I think there are several technologies which will have a very defined impact into the lives of not only our consumers, but also in how we conduct our business. More so speaking from a consumer centricity point of view, because I think consumer is the king, and all the decisions of the business should always be held by making consumer the centerpiece of all of our arguments. I think There are three factors that determine how impactful a technology will be for the consumers. The first factor is determining the correct identity of the consumer in question, because we are dealing with financial transactions, right? So knowing that we are dealing with the right consumer, having the right checks and balances for authentication, authorization are really, really critical. The second factor is understanding the client needs and maybe the ability to predict the next best action or the next best service that the consumer might need. So predictive analytics is going to be super critical there. The third thing and the third factor that determines how impactful a technology will be basically simplifying process for the product or delivery of a service to the end consumer. And how can we squeeze those timelines and those manual interventions and provide a respect for the consumer's time and efforts, right? So keeping these three factors in mind, Babu, I think artificial intelligence, everybody talks about generative AI, artificial intelligence and language models, like large language models, will actually be very, very critical in the process. We already have seen the impact of chatbots and virtual assistants and how they have streamlined our conversation with most of our service providers. Predictive analytics, like I was mentioning earlier, so machine learning algorithms, and the ability to analyze consumer data to make hyper-personalized recommendations, also can assess credit risk and detect fraudulent activities would be very, very critical. Blockchain and distributed ledger technologies, so to ensure safety and security of transactions, especially cross-border payments, can benefit hugely from the whole concept of blockchain, especially on the Ethereum platform. We can also talk about biometrics, so fingerprint and facial recognition, which was pioneered by UPI in India. I think that provides a more secure and convenient way for consumers to access their banking information and to access better products and services. Voice recognition can also be a huge player in the whole arena of identity. So, I mean, the technologies are very many. It's just depending on where a particular financial institution is in its journey of moving towards customer excellence and customer wow, is how we can determine how these different levers can play around and which technology would be more important.
Everything about AI depends ultimately upon the data that is in. Okay, garbage in is ultimately garbage out. On the second thought, there are a lot of regulations related to external data now coming in, and the kind of privacy protection acts and things like that are going globally, not just in Canada. So under all these circumstances, when you try to get into the policy or into technologies like generative AI, how do you navigate the privacy regulations and ensure a consistent supply of data for your plans? Or you just mind what is there in the ingredient that is in the kitchen, do a mix and match of that and try to get into new products and services? How do you do this?
I think before I answer that question, Babu, we need to understand what are we solving and who we are solving for. We're solving for a better consumer experience, keeping the requirements and the needs and wants and desires of the consumer at the center, right? So trust is going to be the biggest factor if we are going to work on technological advances, because we are dealing with people's life savings here when we talk about financial transactions and banking technologies, right? And as disruptive and as innovative as all of these technologies is, we need to invest in consumer education that these technologies are going to help the consumer in choosing the right products and services. So consumer education is going to be really critical here. And how do you educate a consumer? By infusing trust between yourself and the consumer. And I'm here talking about the organizations. So when we talk about Gen AI and privacy, I can recall from my previous work experience of actually leading some of these projects in India and also working on it in Middle East is transparent data practices are really, really critical. Our ability as a business to clearly communicate to users how their data will be collected, processed, and used has come a long way in actually making digital payments such a next door technology in India and in Middle East today. Second is explicit user control and consent. Are we asking consent from the consumer based on a specific use case? And is the user, after even providing the consent, able to modify the consent or revoke the consent completely? So when you actually put the control back in the hands of consumers, you not only give them more control, you also increase the trust between the two. The third could be data minimization. And I think there are lots of conversations on data minimization, whether you talk about FDX, you talk about FAPI standards. Everybody has now understood the importance of data minimization, that we should only collect the minimum amount of data that will help us in solving for a particular use case that the consumer wants us to solve for them, and not collect A to Z of everything and only utilizing the 5 vowels at hand. Fourth is data anonymization and data aggregation. You can collect a lot of individual level of data, but do you have the ability to anonymize the data, hash the data, or even aggregate the data so that the unique client identifiers are nowhere to be found? And that's called like data encryption. There are so many technologies that we can do to do that. And last but not the least is compliance with existing regulation. So we have a really strong GDPR in the UK, which is General Data Protection Regulation. In Canada, we have something called as PIPEDA, which is Personal Information Protection and Electronics Document Act. So understanding those regulations, complying with them, while at the same time building trust with the consumer, providing them with control is, I think, really, really critical to be successful, to the success of the whole Gen AI movement, I would say.
Superb. I think you encapsulated it quite well. And, today a lot of technologies are also being built around by which you can automate this process of getting the right kind of consent from the customer, and at the same time monitoring where the information is going to be used and where it is not, and where also giving the right kind of ticketing when there is some information going to be given in areas outside the purview of what it is taken out for. So a lot more technologies are coming into picture to help people to harness the benefit of this technology as well. And when you are speaking about these trending technologies today, like AI and generative AI and applications of that, how do you see, or what do you think you are more passionate about in each of these areas, and how are you engaging with them either directly or through in association with the fintechs? Because fintech engagement is also another big thing, especially in the retail payments or retail banking space.
Oh, absolutely. And I think with any large scale financial institution, I think there are 3 models in which you can really engage with each of these technologies. One is, do you invest in the technology by yourself? So you hire talent who are super specialized in these technologies, and you work with them. You create projects that are encompassing throughout the enterprise, and you look at the value. The second model is you actually partner, and you partner with a fintech who is working in this niche area, so that you are able to service not only your traditional consumers, but you're also going out of your way to service those bouquet set of consumers that were not being covered by your traditional products and services, because the fintech has the ability to do that. And the third one is to acquire, right? Like if you cannot bring in the talent and if you cannot partner, the third thing is to acquire somebody who's doing a really good job of it. In terms of engagement, I think the way I look at it is, Babu, in retail banking especially, I think generative AI and machine learning, especially large learning models, will enable a lot to enhance the existing consumer experiences, because we will be able to provide them personalized and hyper-personalized services. We will be able to carry out predictive analytics for fraud detection, and we will be able to automate consumer support or customer support, right? Because I don't know how many times have you called most of the service providers in Canada. Usually the wait time is awfully long. But with the help of virtual chatbots, if I'm able to answer most of the FAQs while on the chat, that just reduces, the burden on the manual labor force, and you're also able to respect the consumer's time. Artificial intelligence, LLM is one. The second that we talked about initially was around biometrics for authentication. I mean, it has become a part and parcel of our lives that we open our phones through our thumb imprint. We open our phones to the infrared picture that the iPhone captures every single second that I'm trying to access my phone to make sure that it is dealing with the right owner of the product. So I think biometric authentication has huge applications in retail banking, especially fingerprint and facial recognition. They enhance security and safety while dealing with sensitive transactions. Third is definitely blockchain. Again, like I said, it is very, very close to my heart because blockchain technology does have the potential to streamline and secure processes such as cross-border payments and identity verification. We also can go the route of smart contracts and actually remove all the manual intervention and processes and document control that usually takes a lot of our time and effort. Last but not the least are my very absolute favorites, real-time payments and open banking. I think both of these technologies have had huge impact in various jurisdictions across the world. And if Canada is the only G7 country that does not have either of those, it's time for us to change that.
Super. And I think a lot more is going to come into Canada now because a lot of these technologies are yet to make their dent. And it is not that the Canadian bankers don't know about these technologies. It is just a question of how they are systematically getting ready to imbibe some of these technologies and take it to the future. What does the future of retail banking in Canada look like to you?
I think the retail bank of the future is definitely driven by the trilogy of technology, consumer expectations, and the evolving industry trends. And when I talk about these three separately, I think we need to understand that there is a change in our overall demographics across the globe. Gen Z, millennials, they are more digitally active. So digital first experiences are absolutely critical. And it is very, very important for all the financial institutions, no matter what the size, to prioritize digital channels, offering consumers seamless and user-friendly online and mobile experiences. Digital platforms, in my mind, will become the primary means for account management, transactions, and consumer interactions in just next 5 to 10 years. So that is really critical. Second is personalized services. I think we talk a lot about the importance of data being the new oil. And one thing that I have learned from a lot of my experiences in talking to consumers in various focus groups is, if you know me, you should show me that you know me.
Wow.
It's not only important if you're collecting all of this data from me, and if you have all of this data from me, what are you really presenting me with? You should be able to present to me with personalized services, understanding what is going to be my next milestone in life, my next milestone in terms of my consumer needs. And we have the ability to do a lot of need gap analysis today, but how are we actually putting the puzzles of the pieces together so the customer interactions, from irrespective of which channel the customer is coming to me, becomes channel agnostic, and customer interactions are tailored based on individual preferences, financial behavior, and life events. Third one would be, I think, open banking ecosystem, because open banking will be more prevalent, fostering collaboration between banks and third-party providers. And consumers should definitely have the option to use a range of financial services from different providers within a unified and integrated ecosystem. And I think it's the integration of the various ecosystems that is really the call out here. And last but not the least, we talked a lot about automation. So I'll just keep it short by saying it is imperative in today's economy to deliver efficient, fast, and accurate services. And this is like a non-negotiable as we move into the new era where our consumers are all going to be Gen Z and millennials.
Super. Now let's get into the next, a little softer side of it. As a woman, you have climbed a lot of ladders in the technology side in banking or into the banking business side. You have been a career banker for quite some time. How do you envisage the role of more and more stronger role for women in the financial services sector? And how have you been working towards it?
I think having an equitable, inclusive working environment for women has been a personal agenda that I've been championing for over a decade. So this question is really near and dear to me. To start with, I think this is something that I've also said in my recent interview with the Open Banking Expo people was, as a woman leader, it is really important to bring awareness of the various subconscious bias that lies. And that starts with something as simple as a hiring process. for a woman, right? So in my teams across, like in my experiences in working with various teams across various jurisdictions, one thing that I have really introduced and really stood for is blind hiring practices. And this is not to say that a woman is better than a man. This is just to say that may the best talent win. So up until the interview, I'm really not interested in knowing whether you are a man or a woman or how do you identify yourself. I'm only interested in seeing your credentials speak for who you are. Second thing, which is really, really important to provide amelioration of any strata of society which haven't had an equitable representation at the table, is mentorship and sponsorship. And I think it is time that we make the distinction very, very clear. Having multiple coffee chats with the talent is mentorship. Being able to provide the talent with a career advancement and being able to provide them with opportunities of growth is sponsorship. So people are not sponsoring you unless and until you can see a clear set of accountability in them to see you grow and succeed. Otherwise, it's just mentorship. And the two have been used so interchangeably over the years. I think we really need a conversation. And it's fair if somebody can only be your mentor, but you need to know what you are getting from the relationship. So I know, Babu, you and I talked about Wi-Fi. That is something, that's your initiative, that is something that you're working on. Similarly, there are so many networking events that happen, especially in Canada. I'm a member of Women in Payments. We meet once a year. There is a global mentorship program for women in payments that I'm a mentor for. Then there is an IBM Women in Technology program where they actually bring in women from diverse fields in IBM and have a leadership succession planning done at that program. Microsoft has something called as DigiGirls, where they target high schoolers who are into STEM programs, and they work with them to make them the leaders for tomorrow. We have Google, who has a Women Tech Makers program. There is a huge networking circle called Elevate Network in Toronto. There is Chief in the US and in Canada. So, I mean, there are so many programs that if you're really passionate about making a difference, you can. It's just a matter of how much time and commitment are you able to provide outside of your working hours.
Superb. And you have been an immigrant yourself, and you have seen the kind of hardships that an immigrant would face when they come to a new country, though Canada has been pretty friendly towards immigrants and has been an immigrant-friendly country for quite all these decades that it has been. How are you trying to play a role in easing up this immigrant experiences and making it a lot more pleasant, especially considering the people like you who have come here from leaving aside big roles in different parts of geographies of the world and now making Canada their home?
I think immigration is always a challenging question. And immigrants, when you immigrate into a new country, the biggest challenge that you have is you lose your social net, you lose your social network aside, right? So there is nobody in this new country to vouch for what value do you bring to the table. And I think in my limited capacity, Babu, it's my life's mission to make sure that those who are coming after me have a much easier experience of landing their first job in Canada. And to that effect.
Superb. Thank you very much, Shruti, for an insightful interview here.
Thank you, Babu. It has been an absolute honor and pleasure to meet with you today. Thank you.